So if you haven't seen Yu-Gi-Oh, basically it's about a bunch of teenagers doing high-stakes gambling via trading card game. Unlike regular gambling, where the worst thing that can happen is that you lose your children's college fund on the slot machines and then your wife leaves you and takes the house in the divorce, in Yu-Gi-Oh, the worst thing that can happen is that you are sent to a realm of eternal abyssal suffering. No, not an Applebee's. I'm talking about the Shadow Realm.
No!
We're not just playing for what's inside your deck. We're playing for what's inside your mind.
What's that?
It's a dark energy disc, Yugi, and I wouldn't get too close. One touch and your mind's banished to the Shadow Realm.
The manga and the Japanese version of the anime never even mentioned the Shadow Realm. It turns out that it only even exists in the English dubbed version of Yu-Gi-Oh! In the original version of the show, if you lose a high-stakes card duel, you're just straight up executed.
何?今からあなたには私奇術師パンドラの世紀の大脱出ショーをお目にかけましょう。何?大仕掛けのマジックに使われる回転式のカッターです。その通り、負けた方が刻まれる悪夢のゲーム。
The English version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Was produced by 4Kids Entertainment, and they invented the Shadow Realm specifically to avoid mentioning death. There's actually never any mentions of death or dying in the dub version of Yu-Gi-Oh! At all.
He was the best guy around.
What about the people he murdered?
What murder?
Yu-Gi-Oh!'s English dub also tones down violence, cuts out dirty jokes, de-solidifies outfits, and replaces wine with juice. Basically, the point I'm trying to make here is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is censored. Censorship happens all the time in anime. Sometimes it's easy to spot. Like, remember when Tokyo Ghoul first came out and the fight scenes looked like this?
Damn it! I've had enough of you!
Or like when Persona 2 tried to censor Hitler by slapping a pair of sunglasses on him and calling it a day. But censorship isn't always that easy to spot, especially when it's inside of a dub. The United States has a long history of censoring anime. I want to talk about why that is, what gets censored, and how censorship we see today is different than the kind of censorship we saw in the past. Is censorship a harmless tool used to preserve the innocence of the youths? Or is it political meddling, a violation of freedom of speech and the death of creativity? Well, why don't you just watch the dang video and maybe you'll find out, you Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not the only anime that was sliced and diced for American audiences. The English dubs of Pokemon, One Piece, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, Naruto, and more also went under the knife. Cigarettes, blood, and dead bodies were erased and swear words were written out. Why make such drastic changes to these shows? Well, for the children, of course. One of the most common pro-censorship arguments is that censorship protects kids. This is something I think that most people would actually agree with. Berserk is one of my favorite anime of all time, but anyone who shows it to a 6-year-old should probably be arrested. And that's why mature ratings exist. And it's also why they don't show Berserk on Nickelodeon. But the violence in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is nowhere near as intense as the violence in Berserk. Unless you're counting Kaiba's sick burns, in which case Yu-Gi-Oh! Is extremely graphic.
Draw your last pathetic card so I can end this, Yugi.
I'm glad you came here, because now I get a chance to publicly humiliate you again! You're as irritating as ever.
That's not nice. What did I ever do to deserve such hatred?
It's a long list and I'm short on time.
His name is Darts.
Who's Darts?
Who cares, Yugi?
All right, that little detour was a complete waste of my time and effort. So let's move on and pretend that nonsense never happened.
In Japan, Yu-Gi-Oh! Aired in an afternoon slot on TV, around the same time that kids were getting home from school. It was fine for Japanese kids to watch, so why censor just the English dub? Are American children simply too soft and weak to tolerate the idea of their favorite cartoon character getting brutally murdered by circular saws? The reason that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is censored has less to do with the delicate sensibilities of American children and more to do with politics. We make a big stink about freedom of speech, but the US loves censoring stuff. Whether it's banning books from school libraries or ordering government websites to delete all evidence of climate change. But let's take a step back and rewind to a completely different time. A time when a wealthy, right-wing entertainment star won the office of presidency by promising Americans he would fix the economy. That's right, I'm talking about the 1980s.
If we're going to stop inflation, we must do it now. That's why I'm running for president.
Only one man has the proven experience we need. Ronald Reagan for president. Let's make America great again. Great again. Great again.
The 1970s were actually kind of progressive in terms of politics. There was a push for better women's rights, gay rights, and environmental protections. The 1980s Reagan administration pushed back with conservative policies like crackdowns on labor unions, the war on drugs, and Reaganomics, aka industry deregulation and tax cuts that disproportionately benefited the wealthy and large corporations.
I'm here to represent every single person whose life was ripped apart by your company.
Get in line. I hear that speech every day.
There were way more Reagan-era policies that we're still feeling the effects of today. But if I talked about them all, then we'd be here forever. And good heavens, would you look at the time? Looks like
it's time to do.
In the middle of Reagan's presidency, from about 1984 to 1995, the US had a massive moral panic, which would later be referred to as the Satanic Panic. The Satanic Panic was jump-started after the owners of a Californian daycare were accused of abusing the children in their care. The New York Times reported that the case attracted national attention, which blew wildly out of proportion after authorities speculated that hundreds of children might have been subjected to satanic rituals. In 2015, Dr. Sarah Hughes wrote her philosophy dissertation about the Satanic Panic. In her paper, she explains that the Satanic Panic involved hundreds of accusations that America's white, middle-class, suburban daycare centers were actually being run by devil worshippers. She also wrote that the panic was rooted in the decade's increasingly conservative political ideology. Once the public got wind of that California daycare case, tabloid media in the 24-hour news cycle had a stranglehold on the public. Newscasts and daytime talk shows constantly featured segments on child abuse, devil worship, and human sacrifices.
Well, Terry, authorities tell us that the most serious or perhaps the most dangerous kind of devil worship comes in the form of underground cults. Most of them are very secretive, usually organizing clandestine rituals in the dark of night.
People kept their eyes glued to their TV screens, and networks were raking in the cash. The target audience of all this media fear-mongering were mostly middle-class white Christian parents who were living in the suburbs. Sure, they were worried that their kids might be kidnapped off the streets, but even more than that, they were worried that their little darlings might become corrupted by obscene or violent media.
Warning signs of satanic behavior may be apparent, such as a sudden, bitterly antagonistic attitude towards family and religion, a reclusive behavior pattern, and listening exclusively to heavy metal rock music. When one or more of these warning signs are evident, you should look further for ritual items such as a pentagram or other satanic symbols.
So, concerned moms rallied together to help ban dangerous gateways to Satanism, like Dungeons and Dragons, video games, and heavy metal music. Now, I like all of those things, and although I am not a Satanist, I do unfortunately play League of Legends, so maybe they are onto something there. Anyway, cartoons were also catching strays from conservative evangelicals. Take, for instance, this truly unhinged clip from the television program Turmoil and Toy Box, which accused the cartoon He-Man of having occult undertones.
Now, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe really broke the ground on this cartoon occultism.
Really? Well, let's look at Skeletor now. We've got him up on our screen, and Skeletor is this ugly-looking skeletal creature with a staff in his hand. Now, what's that staff that he's got in his hand?
The staff is a ram's head staff. Now, the ram's head is a very occultic symbol. It's boiled in cauldrons. It's used in different occult practices. Now, Skeletor introduces most of the occult within the toy series. He has the ability to mind control, to levitate, to astral project, and to do many other occult practices and pagan religion practices.
Wow. You got anything to say for yourself, Skeletor?
You pathetic pair of pitiful pinheads! Dolts! Half-wits! Bunglers!
As you can imagine, networks wanted to avoid being accused of worshiping Satan, so they tried not to air anything that parents might have a problem with. It wasn't strictly illegal for cartoons to show violence or death, but networks did whatever they could to keep viewers, or more specifically viewers' parents, happy. Although the Satanic Panic and the reign of Reagan were both over by the mid-1990s, the damage was done. Cartoons and anime especially were still being villainized by the media pretty often. In 1999, this Wall Street Journal article called Dragon Ball Z Pulp Fiction Meets Pokemon. And speaking of Pokemon, here's some footage of TV preachers explaining how Pikachu trains children in the dark arts of witchcraft.
So Pokemon is a game that teaches children how to enter into the world of witchcraft, how to cast spells, how to use psychic phenomena, how to put to work supernatural powers against their enemies, how to fantasy role play. Pokemon world is a world of the demonic, of the satanic.
Damn, I hope for this guy's sake, nobody ever shows him Persona.
Whether it's, listen, rock music, whether it's whatever, now the internet.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Didn't air in the United States until 2006, a full 10 years after the Satanic Panic had already come to an end. It wasn't just obvious stuff like death and profanity that got cut from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Dub. If networks were willing to censor anything that might affect their viewership, that meant that there was nothing stopping them from removing anything and everything that a conservative parent might complain about. Like, say, for example, the Satanic Panic wasn't just about a bunch of people ranting and raving about cartoon characters. It also caused real harm to people and led to rampant racism, classism, and homophobia. It happened in the midst of the 1980s HIV/AIDS epidemic, so while people were getting sick by the thousands and the Reagan administration was ignoring the outbreak, the media controlled the narrative. Naturally, the media hopped on board the homophobia train and started calling the virus the gay plague.
A mystery disease known as the gay plague has become an epidemic unprecedented in the history of American medicine. That today from the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. Topping the list of likely victims are male homosexuals who have many partners and drug users who inject themselves with needles.
While in the 1970s, it seemed like the public perception of queer folks was kind of moving towards acceptance, in the 80s, the government and the media just swung things hard in the opposite direction.
I asked some high school kids.
What do you think of gay people? Are you serious? I think it's unreligious.
I think it's wrong because, like, if they like spread AIDS around and stuff, it kills innocent people.
And go to most any bar, and I bet you'll find someone who'll say,
I don't think the fact that they got AIDS, they're spreading it around, they're blatant with their sex, that's what's causing it. That's what's causing a lot of the spreading around. I don't like it.
You think there ought to be something done about them?
Yeah. What? Put them on an island like they used to do the lepers.
Into the late 90s and early 2000s, children's TV shows were constantly raked over the coals for even the slightest chance that a character might be gay. This article in Big Think, written by Louis Anslow, explains that cartoon characters in the late 90s were called out on the regular if they seemed too fruity. Among the accused were SpongeBob, Bert and Ernie. Okay, I can actually kind of understand Bert and Ernie.
Well, Bert, I know this is silly, but, well, I just have to ask you. Do you like me?
Ernie. Yes, I like you.
Really?
That is right.
Even Tinky Winky from the Teletubbies. He got called gay because he was always out slaying with his red Chanel bag. God forbid a guy try to accessorize. Anime was no exception to this rule. Yu-Gi-Oh's dub underwent extensive rewrites and editing to make the show more consistent with traditional gender norms. For example, Season 3's villain, Yubel, is canonically intersex. Yubel is both male and female. This is a reference to ancient alchemy, specifically the ancient alchemical creation called a rebus. A rebus is supposed to be a perfect androgynous being who has both male and female qualities. In the Japanese version of the show, Yubel is referred to as both he and she, and they speak with two different voices, one masculine and one feminine. But in the dub version of the show, Yubel has just one feminine voice and is only ever referred to as she, her pronouns.
Shall we settle this once and for all, Jaden?
This probably happened because Yubel spends most of their screen time being absolutely down bad for Jaden, and the dub wanted to make their relationship as straight as possible.
Haven't you realized it yet, Jaden? I've always strived to shelter you from harm, even if it meant hurting those closest to you. And I won't stop, not until you are safe from every evil. And to ensure that, I will create a world for just you and me.
The most well-known example of dubbing the gay away is probably the English dub of Sailor Moon, which tried to hide Uranus and Neptune's lesbian relationship by playing it off like they were just really close cousins.
Oh, great. Why do you think they've entered the contest?
They're girls and cousins, too. Amara, Michelle! Fantastic! You're the best cousins in the world!
Leave it to me, cuz. Okay.
If you want to see more, here's a compilation I found from this YouTube channel with some excellent examples of how the dub tried to fix their relationship. The Sailor Moon dub also changed a character's gender to avoid portraying a gay relationship. In the original Japanese version, Kunzite and Zayasai are two men in a romantic relationship.
Kunzite-sama, 私悔しい。ネフライトの好きにさせておけ。さすがはKunzite-sama.
The dub just decided to make Zayasai a woman so that they could be a straight couple instead.
Wonderful. Then I don't have to explain things. Kneel down, boy, and submit to powers.
Look how they massacred my boy.
Cardcaptor Sakura's English dub also wrote out any references to non-straight romance and toned down Toya and Yukito's relationship. I'm gonna call this type of censorship direct censorship. Direct censorship happens whenever someone changes the storyline directly to hide or remove certain parts of it. So bleeping out a swear word, or editing out a gun, or making lesbians into BFFs all count as direct censorship. But into the late 2010s, direct censorship was happening less and less, and another type of censorship started popping up more. This new type of censorship is what I'm going to call self-censorship. Self-censorship happens when a creator censors their own work on purpose. For example, they might want to include a gay relationship in their story, but maybe they tone down the romance a little to make it more ambiguous. There are plenty of reasons why someone might want to self-censor. They could do it to avoid controversy or harassment. Maybe they could do it to keep their job or avoid being blacklisted by the industry. Or maybe they could just do it because their parents read their manga. Gege, the creator of Jujutsu Kaisen, said in an interview that they didn't dare to make Nobara or any of their female characters too sexy because their parents read the manga. A lot of popular mangakas like Gege also use pen names and remain anonymous on purpose to hide their real identities because they want to avoid harassment from toxic fans. Self-censorship seems to be more common than direct censorship nowadays. Take, for example, the Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, sometimes called the founder of Diabolism, a Chinese animation or donghua based on the best-selling novel series. This novel series, to be exact, it's a Chinese series, so it's not quite as popular in the United States, but it has some absolutely beautiful art and some of the best, most killer fight choreography you've ever seen. It's also really popular internationally. Here's a member of Taiwanese parliament cosplaying as the protagonist. Anyway, in the novels, the two leads Wei Wuxian and Lang Wenji are without a doubt the gayest people on the planet. But showing gay relationships on TV is illegal in China. So the donghua focuses more on the political intrigue and action of the story and tries to play Wei Wuxian and Lang Wenji off as just a couple of good pals.
Two bros chilling in the hot tub, 5 feet apart cause they're not gay.
I don't really count this as direct censorship because the show wasn't edited by the government. The showrunners purposefully chose to adapt the novel differently because they knew the show would never have been able to air otherwise. Credit where credit is due though. They tried really hard to sneak in as many long, wistful, pining glances as possible. Also, there's this scene where Wei Wuxian and Lang Wenji are basically wearing traditional Chinese wedding clothes, which I think is really cute. Self-censorship also happens in countries where it's perfectly legal to show gay relationships on TV, like the United States. Nickelodeon's treatment of The Legend of Korra made some interesting choices about what they were and weren't willing to broadcast to viewers. Spoiler warning, by the way. One of the gayest anime I can think of, and even though it seems totally fine with showing a romantic relationship between the leads Yuri and Victor, the couple's only on-screen kiss looks like this. If you're gonna go to all the trouble of making your leads obviously gay for each other, then why hide their kiss? Well, according to Sayo Yamamoto, the director of Yuri on Ice, she had to fight to even get this watered-down version of a kiss included in the show. Here's a translated quote of hers from the Yuri on Ice fanbook, where she talks about the kiss. Truth is, all sides tried to stop it along the way, but I would not remove it from the episode. Even being aware that the people around me wouldn't be able to understand, I forced it. It's not that unusual for anime to show gay relationships without showing intimacy like a kiss or a confession. One example is Skate the Infinity, which has multiple queer-coded relationships. I've already made a whole video about Skate, and I'm not going to talk about all that gay shit again, so just go watch it if you don't believe me. But just because showing gay relationships on screen is more accepted now, it doesn't mean that it's easy. In the summer of 2024, Studio Dean released an anime called Twilight Out of Focus, a romance about two high school roommates falling in love.
You two seem awfully close.
Well, yeah, we're roommates. Why wouldn't we be awfully close?
Say what?
Oh my god, babe, we're roommates.
When the first episode was uploaded to Crunchyroll, it was immediately bombed with hundreds of one-star reviews and homophobic comments like these.
What the hell is this? Nobody in their right mind should watch this. It's frankly disgusting, and the fact that people would waste their precious life and time creating this is also a loss to humanity and anime. If I wanted to see sausage, I'd go to a gay bar.
LGBT bullshit run! Another attempt from Crunchyroll or Alphabet people to make something become accepted. Not gonna happen.
No one wanted this. Was wondering what this show was and looked it up. It's a gay boy show, so clearly it's disgusting and only a select few girls would maybe be interested in it. Does Crunchyroll not realize that the majority of people who watch anime are straight men?
On July 8th, just 4 days after the episode was uploaded to their website, Crunchyroll disabled and deleted comments. Not just for this show, but for every show on their entire platform. Crunchyroll was yet another tragic victim of the gay agenda. Although Crunchyroll never officially said that their decision to remove comments was directly caused by a bunch of edgelords posting gay slurs to their website, people put two and two together pretty quick. The Western anime community took Crunchyroll's Great Comment Purge about as well as they took the end to Attack on Titan. Which is to say, pretty bad. Angry fans said that Crunchyroll had betrayed their loyalty and violated their freedom of speech. I actually kind of agree with these guys. Not about the whole going woke bit, but I do think that it was pretty lame for Crunchyroll to censor all of its users. Sure, disabling comments did stop a minority of bad actors from spreading hate speech, but it also ruined it for everybody else. Crunchyroll didn't have to delete and disable all comments from their whole platform. They could have hired moderators to delete only the hateful stuff while leaving the rest of us to continue having our respectful, dignified conversations like these. generating comments costs money. And Sony, who acquired Crunchyroll in 2021, needs money to do very important business things. Things like merging Crunchyroll and Funimation together to create a kind of anime streaming monopoly, and then shutting down Funimation 2 years after said merger, therefore deleting a bunch of Funimation's content and screwing over the thousands of customers who had paid real money for episodes of anime which are now permanently inaccessible to them. So anyway, Crunchyroll, aka Sony, needed to do something about these comments. Comment moderation costs money, so that's out, but leaving comments like this up would probably cause some public backlash. And if there's anything advertisers don't like, it's public backlash. So Sony resolved the problem in the cheapest way possible by just deleting comments completely. Sure, there was backlash from fans, but who cares? A couple of people might cancel their subscriptions, but where else are they gonna legally stream anime in the United States? Funimation? One thing I see circulating online among Western anime fans all the time is this. People complaining that English translators or subtitlers are not being faithful to the original Japanese script. Probably the most common example of this is this line of dialogue from Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid.
何ですかその格好。いつも言われるから露出度を抑えたんだ。どうかな。次は体を変えるといいですよ。どうぞ上がってください。
What are you wearing that for? Oh, those pesky patriarchal societal demands were getting on my nerves, so I changed clothes.
Give it a week, they'll be begging you to change back.
Huh?
You can come on in if you want.
Okay, I am down to the patriarchy as much as the next gal, but this does seem like a pretty strong deviation from the original script. This particular issue is not actually a censorship issue, it's more of a localization issue. Localizing is different than censorship because the goal isn't to protect the children, it's more so to try and replace cultural concepts that the audience might not understand. For example, censorship happens when the beach episode of Pokemon is completely cut from the English dub. Gee, I wonder why. And localization happens when Brock declares his love for jelly donuts while clearly brandishing a rice ball.
These donuts are great! Jelly-filled are my favorite! Nothing beats a jelly-filled donut!
The goal is not to censor the naughty onigiri to preserve the children's innocence. Instead, the goal is to replace it with a snack that American kids are more familiar with. Most localization flies under the radar, but too much localization or bad localization can lead to major changes that alter the intentional message of the source material. This is also something that happens in Yu-Gi-Oh! But before I get into it, first, I want to backtrack for a sec and talk about the creator of Yu-Gi-Oh! Kazuki Takahashi.
よろしくお願いします。うちのワンちゃんはうちの愛犬の太郎くんです。よろしくね。そこの頭巾とか見覚えがあるんですか？これ芝選手太郎っていうカードのメモになりましたね。そうです。
Although he never publicly announced his political affiliation to fans, in 2019, Kazuki Takahashi made this Instagram post criticizing Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's conservative hardline administration and encouraging people to vote in an upcoming election. Now, if you pay attention, you might see some more of Kazuki's political beliefs very subtly woven into Yu-Gi-Oh! The main source of conflict in Yu-Gi-Oh! Comes from power imbalances. People in positions of wealth and power abusing that privilege in order to prioritize their wishes over the livelihoods of everyone else.
So you've got a dweeb army. Am I supposed to be scared to attack?
Well, only if destroying an innocent soul concerns you.
Nah. As the president of a major corporation, I have to do that every day.
In the first season, we learned that there are only 4 copies of the Blue Eyes White Dragon card in the whole world. Kaiba, a billionaire CEO, has 3 of them, and Yugi, a regular kid, has 1. Kaiba uses his wealth and power to steal this card from Yugi and tear it up right in front of him.
Grandpa's most treasured card!
Yes, the Blue Eyes White Dragon is a rare and powerful card, and this one will never be used against me.
In the Pharaoh's Memory arc, Yugi learns that Akhenaten and the Pharaoh sacrificed 99 innocent villagers to create the Millennium items. In Duelist Kingdom, gazillionaire Maximilian Pegasus hosts a dueling tournament with a cash prize, and Joey enters because the prize money is the only way he can afford to pay for his sister's surgery to cure her blindness.
Check it out! The Kaiba Corporation is streaming the Battle City tournament live on the internet. I thought we'd watch Joey's next duel together.
Tristan, I can't.
Oops.
In Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, the main characters all come from a literal ghetto called the Old Satellite District, which is just a garbage dump where everyone from New Domino sends their trash. The people born in Old Satellite live in poverty, they're surrounded by pollution, and they're constantly discriminated against by all the wealthy elite living in New Domino.
Everyone has been given a role in life. Those from the satellite exist so that the chosen may prosper. They keep our city functioning by recycling what the chosen discard. Without the satellite, New Domino City could not exist.
Back to the original point. What does all this have to do with localization? Well, take a look at this scene from Yu-Gi-Oh! The Dark Side of Dimensions, a movie where Kaiba is giving a speech. This is Kaiba's speech in the English dub.
This is the start of a new dueling era. An era where the only limits that we face will be those put in place by our own imagination. For too long, we've been forced to live in just this reality. And when you wield my duel disc, you will find I've spared no expense to make sure you have pure tech perfection.
Now, do I think that the English translators wrote the speech differently because they're a bunch of classist, evil capitalists? No, I think they changed it because it sounds funny and it makes Kaiba look like a badass. Most of the time, I don't mind these changes to characters' dialogue. But this scene in particular, which leans into Kaiba's ego, kind of undermines the whole point of the movie. The original Japanese speech is a message about Kaiba's personal philosophy of what it means to be a duelist. It shows us that this is not the same Kaiba from Season 1 who stole Yugi's Blue Eyes White Dragon card. Later on in this movie, Kaiba ends up sacrificing himself, which shows huge character development on his part.
Now which of you pests shall be the first to perish? I choose Yugi.
Oh, no you don't. Go, Crystal Avatar! Your attack switches to me!
But Kaiba, you won't survive this! Kaiba! Why did you do that?
For him. The Pharaoh.
Kaiba starts out as this egotistical jerk who uses his wealth and power to manipulate others. But he ends up as this egotistical jerk who can put his arrogance aside and trust in his ally. By translating this speech to sound like Kaiba is just going on an ego trip, the dub version totally misses out on a piece of his character development. I have a lot of respect for Yu-Gi-Oh! Storytelling, so it's sad to see that storytelling change so much, all for the sake of a punchline. Not all censorship is black and white. It's easy to say that censorship is wrong in theory, but in practice, sometimes it can be a good thing. For instance, I think that nudity should always be censored for underage characters. There are times when I think censorship can even add a certain charm to a show. Like, I think Samurai Champloo's censorship is great.
To serve your lord and do his bidding, is that honorable?
Of course it is.
Even if that lord is an unimportant piece of...
Say what? Hey!
I also really like the censorship in Danganronpa, both the video game and the show. In Danganronpa, all the blood is colored hot pink instead of red because of censorship rules about violence. But I think it works really well, both as a stylistic design choice and as kind of a thematic point of the show. So Danganronpa is all about a bunch of teenagers who are brutally dying in the most horrible ways possible, but at the same time, it's like a comedy where there's a talking teddy bear villain. Basically, it makes everything feel absurd and ridiculous, which is what Danganronpa is all about. So, what's the verdict? Is censorship right or wrong? Personally, I do think that censorship does more harm than good. It's politicized, it can alter the author's original intentions, it erases marginalized groups of people like the gay community, and it generally just makes a show less fun to watch. On rare occasions, if censorship is done right and thoughtfully with the intent to honor the author's original intent, then it can be a good thing, but in general, I would prefer not to see it. Self-censorship is unfortunately probably going to continue so long as creators keep getting massive backlash and hate for daring to break the mold by including female protagonists, queer people, or people of color in their work. Like the new Lord of the Rings anime movie that just came out got hate online for daring to have a female lead. But fortunately for us, there are plenty of creators out there who refuse to self-censor and who don't shy away from this type of criticism. Creators like Kazuki Takahashi, who was not only a great storyteller, but someone who used his stories to bring attention to real problems like classism, inequality, and the abuse of power. Kazuki passed away in 2020 at just 60 years old, and although he might be gone, his legacy does live on. His work has inspired kids all over the world to think strategically, to believe in the power of teamwork, and to realize that their worth doesn't come from wealth or power. It comes from the heart of the cards.
Who cares if he's richer than me? And so what if he's more powerful? I'm really good at playing card games. And that's what life is really all about anyway!